Hello, this is our first lesson on linear models. And in this lesson, we will be using real-world situations to not only write an equation, but also create a table. So our learning target is I can create tables and equations that models a real-world situation when given the scenario. And our success criteria is I can identify and label important information. We're going to be using the three reads process. I can create a table using the starting value, which we already know as the y-intercept, and using the rate, which we already know as the slope. And then I can write the equation in slope-intercept form that models the scenario in the table. And then if we have time to do an extension activity where we use the equation and then substitution to solve real-world problems about the situation. Just to sort of get us involved with slope-intercept form equations, because that's going to be the type of equation that we're going to be writing today, they have a special format. And the format for slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. And a lot of times the y that we see starting off the equation is written as f with the parentheses with the x in the middle, which is read as f of x. So it can either start off as y equals or f of x equals, and then mx plus b. So with numbers in there, you would see something that looks like this. Y equals 2x plus, say, a 5. And the y can also be written, if we don't want to use a y, or sometimes they don't, as f of x equals 2x plus 5. Either way works. Right now we're going to stick with the y because that's what we're going to see at the very beginning. Now, notice we put numbers in the M location as well as in the B location, whereas the Y and the X stay as a Y and an X in the equation. The M location, the M number, is the slope number. And when we deal with real world situations, we call that now the rate of change. And there's a quick way to sort of remember and look for the rate of change number in a word problem is you look for three words, either per, each, or every. Those will indicate the rate word. And we will see how we do that, but if we're looking for that P, per, each, or every, to indicate a rate word. The other thing with the rate is that it happens and repeats over and over, and we use that in the table because it will either increase our table numbers or decrease our table numbers by the same amount over and over again. Whereas the B value is what we were calling our y-intercept, but in a word problem, it's our starting value, which I refer to as the SV. Other people will call it the initial value or the beginning because it happens at the beginning, not of the scenario, but of the situation. And sometimes people refer to it as a one-time fee because that makes it different than the rate. Whereas the rate is going to happen over and over, the starting value is only going to happen one time at the beginning. So in the equation y equals 2x plus b, 2 is our rate, so we're increasing by 2 every time, but we're starting with 5. 5 is the starting value, and then you would increase it by 2 to get to 7, and then increase it by 2 to get to 9, and then you would just keep increasing it. So that's the basic way our equations are going to work. Here's our first scenario. This is example 1. It says the on-the-go phone company has 2 monthly plans for their customers. The 40-to-go plan costs $40 to sign up plus 5 cents per streaming minute. And then it says create a table and write the equation that models this situation. We're going to use the three reads process. That was the first read, and that first read is to just get a general idea about the problem. We know it has to do with phone plans. We know it has to do with the cost, the money to pay for the plan, and the minutes, because it's using minutes to charge us for the plan. And we know we have to create a table and an equation. The second read is when you go in there and you just read little parts of it. So I'm going to make a slash mark where there's a period. Some people also do it where they see the word and, or sometimes with a comma. And now I'm just going to read each little section up to a slash mark. So example 1, On the Go Phone Company has 2 monthly plans for their customers. Now that's nice to know background information, but it doesn't have anything mathematically important in there. So I'm just going to mark through it. I'm going to still be able to see it if I want to look at it later, but I know I've read it and looked at it. The second part is starting inside those two slash marks. The 40 to go plan costs $40 to sign up plus 5 cents per streaming minute. Now that has two important mathematical pieces of information. The first is the $40, so I'm going to write that down. And then you need to write down what it's for. It's to sign up. The second one is the 5 cents, and you need to write down what it's for. It was per streaming minute. So I'm just going to write down per minute. And now I know that I've got the important information from that piece. I'm just going to mark through. And again, I don't black it out because I may want to look at it later. And then the next thing it says is to create a table and write the equation. Well, there's nothing mathematically important from there, but it does give us our goal, which I always put on the bottom one. My goal is I need to make a table and an equation. So that when I'm done, I refer to my goal and say, have I done what it told me to do? So that's what I need to do. Now I need to be able to pick out from what I wrote down, what's my rate of change and what's my starting value. Well, if we remember those rate of change, those little clue words, I'm going to write down the P. Remember the P. That stood for per, each, and every. That will clue me in on a rate, and I'm just now looking at the stuff that I wrote down. I'm not going back up to the word problem, just where I wrote it down. And yes, I've got a per word. So I'm going to draw an arrow to the number next to it. Remember, per, each, and every, these words here indicate a rate. So that number right next to it, that is my rate number. Okay, and it just so happens that the word that it goes with, what is that 5 cents for? It's for the minutes. That indicates your X because the rate and the X always go together. If we look back up at our equation, the M is the rate. The rate always goes with your X. They go together. So they appear together and going together in the problem. The 5 cents is for the minutes, so the minutes is our X. And if we come over here and mark our XY table, we always know X is always first, Y is always second, and it does show that the X is in the minutes slot. So yes, the X is the minutes. Now when I write my rate, I'm going to write down my 5 cents. And I am going to write my X with it, even though the X is not the rate, but just to remind myself that the 5 cents is the number that should get the letter that goes with it. Because the rate letter, the X, goes with the rate. Okay, now then it says starting value. That's what's happening at the beginning of the situation. Before you can ever use your phone, before they're going to charge you any minutes, you've got to pay the sign-up fee. So that's the $40. And that's the starting value, and I can even label that as V there. Now, if we remember how our equation was written, I'm just going to scroll down. It was y equals mx plus b. M was the rate, and b was the starting value. So I can write y equals, my m number is at 0.05, and if I've got my x with it, I just write it right with it, and then my starting value was the plus 40. And that is a perfectly acceptable way to write that equation. I'm going to erase this part a little bit. Some people will write it sort of in a backwards order. There's nothing wrong with it like this. 40, y equals 40 plus 0.05x. Okay, notice the x is always with the rate. That's with that 5 cents. But this order is sort of the order of the action, what's happening. First, you have to pay that $40 just to sign up, and then they would charge you 5 cents for every minute that you use. So the second equation in green just sort of is the order that the action is happening. It's not the order that it was stated in the scenario, but if this were actually happening in real life, that would be the order. And it's fine to write it either way as long as the rate is always with the x. And also remember that the y doesn't have to be there. It can be written with the function notation of f of x. So if I'm going to write my table down, okay, I'm going to remember that One of the things that we have to know is our starting value, and I'm going to highlight this cell right here because that starting value number that we got, which was our 40 right here, that was our starting value. That's what starts off our table. But we've got to make sure that when we look at our table, that 40, when we place it, is right next to the 0 on the X. That indicates our starting value. If there's another number over here in the X, then we don't place the 40 by it. The 40 always goes by the 0, so we might have to adjust our table a little bit because the starting value always goes where the X is 0 because that's at the very start. You haven't used any minutes yet, but you still have to pay the $40 to sign up. The rate is what's going to tell you how it's increasing or decreasing. And since you're having to pay this, it's increasing your cost. So to go up to the next cell, you're going to have to add that 5 cents. So 40 plus 5 cents is just 40 and 5 cents. To go up to add another minute, you're going to have to add another 5 cents because each minute is going to cost you another 5 cents. So now it's 40 and 10 cents. Remember we said the rate happens over and over, and this is how that's happening. In order to increase your minutes, you have to keep adding another 5 cents. So for 3 minutes, it's going to be $40.15. And then to keep going, for 4 minutes, you would add another 5 cents. So you would do 40 $40 and 20 cents. And you could keep going with that table, just keep adding your minutes, adding your 5 cents, and you just keep going forward and make a bigger, longer table if you want. But that's the basics of how to take your scenario, pick out your important information, use your rate words, your clue words per each every to figure out what your rate number is and then what your starting value is to substitute in your equation and then to create your table.